Good morning, Professor Dahl. How's it going? Julio Gonzalez from your Teachings and Doctrines of the Book of Mormon class. I just wanted to give you the presentation that you asked me for to just kind of explain and go through my project. My project is on Book of Mormon and Mind Palaces, and this is a principle that I wanted to show my peers as to how they can memorize scriptures in a faster way than the average human being. The purpose for this presentation is because I wanted to target the audience of individuals, young people that are trying to go on a mission. They can use this tool in order to memorize scripture references for their lessons or scripture references that will help them throughout their mission. Number 2, returned missionaries that want to keep that habit of memorizing scriptures. And number 3, anyone and everyone that goes through anxiety, depression, and temptation. That should include about all of us. The reason that I wanted to talk about memorizing scriptures is because of this quote by Elder Richard G. Scott, really powerful. It says that great power can come from memorizing scriptures. To memorize the scripture is to forge a new friendship. If there is anything we need right now during these last days, it's that ability to have a constant friend, and that constant friend can come from the scriptures, can come from the Spirit through the scriptures. And that is one of the main reasons I wanted to share this with everyone. Now, the first thing I want you to understand is what are mind palaces. Mind palaces is the ability for you to mentally walk through a palace, a home, or a place that you're familiar, and label certain things or items in that palace that will remind you of the things you're trying to remember or memorize. For example, if we were to make a mind palace right now in the apartment which I'm in, this is the front door. I would come in, and the first item that I would make something memorable out of will be this desk, because it's the first thing I see mentally. As it says here, is the ability to memorize items in an imaginary palace where you can walk and label the surroundings. There is a method to approaching this, and there is 5 steps. Number 1, to create and use the mind palaces that we just talked about and described. Number 2, to replace numbers 1 through 99 with people and images. People ask me a lot about this second part. Why people and images? It has been scientifically proven that we are more likely to remember items, faces, things that are visual more than we are to remember numbers and specific names. That's why when we see the face of someone that we know their face, but we sometimes don't remember their name. The third thing that we need to do is select the scriptures, doctrinal points, or even, a terminology in anatomy and physiology that we wish to commit to memory. The fourth thing we have to do is place the scriptural reference or doctrinal points onto a location within the memory palace. And fifth is review. A fair warning. People tend to say when they are exposed to this technique that it can be hard, that it can be too difficult to master, or I guess this just isn't for me. Elder Cleveland Gott, the one that actually came up with this strategy specifically for scriptures, said that may be your initial response, but no, it is not, unless you're willing to put forth consistent and prayerful effort. So this can be done to anyone, and anyone can achieve this. So the first thing that we talked about, for me, this is part of my mind palace. For numbers 1 to 10, these are the things that I am reminded of when I think of these numbers. For example, number 1, when I think of 1, I think of Abraham Lincoln. Why? Because I think of the penny. That's my person and my item, Abraham Lincoln and the penny. When I think of number 2, I think of Batman. Why? Because the second letter in the alphabet is B. And the item for Batman will be a batarang. The three apostles, Peter, James, and John, remind me of fishes, so on and so forth. The main purpose of you coming up with persons and items, they have to be yours. They can't just be mine. You can take some if you want, you relate, but they have to be yours. So that way you can relate to it and you can understand it. There's a slide that I was going to demonstrate, like scriptures that I memorized already, but for the sake of time, I'm just going to move on to the let us practice. For example, let's say that we're trying to memorize these scriptures, right? Like we said, we're going to give names, items. So for example, for me, when I think of Second Nephi, I think of boats. When I think of Alma, I think of natural springs. When I think of Helaman, I think of a war zone. When I think of their Nephi, I think of an Aztec temple. And when I think of Moses, I think of a high mountain. Now let's say I'm trying to memorize 2 Nephi chapter 2, verse 14. We're just going to do this one for the sake of time. When I think of 2 Nephi chapter 2, verse 14, my mind palace takes me to the outside of my backyard. I go right outside, and this boat pulls up, and Batman's driving this boat. When he's in this boat, he comes up to me, gets down, and he gets this book, lifts it high up in the air, and he says, Julio, there are two types of things in this world. There are things to act like you, and things to be acted upon like this book. Number 2 for me is Batman. Number 14 for me represents a teacher, which is the age when a young man becomes a teacher in the priesthood. And the item for a teacher is a book for me. Thus, 2 Nephi chapter 2, verse 14. And what does that scripture talk about? We are agents to act, and there are things to be acted upon. I would have gone through all these. If you want to, Professor, look at these and how they work. The number 25 reminds me of quarters. Number 42 for Jackie Robinson. Helaman 1430. The main key principle in this is the ability of one using their imagination to memorize and make these principles and scriptures stick. Honestly, like throughout my experience with the memory palaces, I've been able to use them whenever I get stressed, whenever I get anxious, and I constantly feel the Spirit. And I love that one talk by Elder Ezra Taft Benson, where he said that when we keep Christ-like thoughts in our heads, we're most likely to be more Christ-like. And I know this to be true. I've enjoyed your class. Thank you very much. This is my presentation.